welcome. Thank you for joining us for this morning's core coffee chat on building the foundation for early school success before, during, and after COVID-19. I'm Nicole Young with Optimal Solutions Consulting, and I'm joined today by my co-host.
Good morning, I'm Nicole Lezin.
And we're both consultants based in Santa Cruz County, and we facilitate a countywide initiative called Core Investments, which we'll describe in just a moment. But today's coffee chat is co-hosted by First Five Santa Cruz County and the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And this event is taking place as part of the National Grade Level Reading Week, which is taking place all this week with events happening throughout the country. And so we'll actually have some folks joining us from other states this morning. And so we'll look forward to virtually meeting them as well. And we're also very pleased to have Dr. Michelle Rodriguez, the Superintendent of Schools in Pájaro Valley Unified School District, joining us today. And welcome, Dr. Rodriguez, and thanks for being here this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And we'll also do a formal introduction of Dr. Rodriguez in just a moment. But for now, I want to invite all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat box. So if you look for that little speech bubble icon somewhere in your meeting control panel, then tell us your name and what organization you're from, what community you're from. So if you're from another county outside of Santa Cruz, we'd love to know that, or from another state. And feel free to keep using the chat box throughout this session to ask questions, share your comments, and we'll keep an eye on that. And even if we don't get a chance to address all of the questions in today's session, we'll work on getting some answers to send in a follow-up document after today's session. So as I mentioned, Nicole and I facilitate this countywide initiative called the Collective of Results and Evidence-Based, or Core Investments. And it's a collective impact approach to achieving equitable health and well-being for all people across the lifespan in Santa Cruz County. And CORE began as a funding model a few years ago. It was adopted by the County of Santa Cruz and the City of Santa Cruz as their way of funding evidence-based safety net services provided by nonprofit organizations. And over the last few years, Nicole and I have worked with a number of partners from local governments, philanthropy, nonprofits, and different community groups to really broaden that definition of CORE to make it more than just a funding model. It's really evolved into a movement to achieve these mission and vision statements that you see on your screen. And you'll see they're really centered around taking collective action to ensure that our county is equitable, thriving, resilient, and notice how equity is at the center of all of that. So when we say equitable health and well-being, what we mean is that we want all people throughout the lifespan to have opportunities to experience these 8 interconnected core conditions for health and well-being, and that people's opportunities and their life outcomes aren't predictable, for better or for worse, by things like race, ethnicity, income level, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, their zip code, or other defining characteristics. So when we apply this framework to today's topic of grade level reading, early school success, learning loss, and recovery, then we can think about things like how grade level reading is the focus of a national campaign, because research tells us that reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade is tied to later outcomes in lifelong learning and education, like academic growth and high school graduation. And that's important because there's a shift that happens from 3rd grade, where up until then, kids are learning to read. And then starting in 4th grade, it's more of a shift to reading to learn. And so if there aren't the systems and supports to develop those foundational literacy skills in the early grades, there's a greater risk of students leaving school without earning their high school diplomas, which can then create barriers to finding jobs later on that provide wages that create economic security and mobility in adulthood. And that in turn makes it much harder, as you can imagine, to find stable and affordable housing, which can also impact other aspects of health and well-being and safety and justice. And grade level reading and learning in general are also affected by many other factors, both inside and outside of the classroom, such as health and wellness, right? And children are better able to learn when they have access to physical, dental, behavioral health care, and they have healthy food, and they have opportunities for physical activity. And their learning environments matter too. So healthy environments that are safe and free from pollutants, lead, and pesticides actually support children's ability to learn. And being part of a thriving family is an important contributor to early learning and school success as well. Schools are also physical and now virtual places where students can connect with caring adults, be exposed to arts and diverse cultural experiences, and participate in community service and other types of civic engagement. All of those are forms of what we call community connectedness, which is an important contributor to school success. And of course, equitable education systems are a critical aspect of creating safe, just communities for everyone. So the point of this example is that all of these core conditions are connected, and we could continue drawing lines that connect the dots, with each line either representing adversity and inequities, or ideally representing individual strengths and systemic changes that lead to more positive outcomes. And you'll see equity is at the center of this diagram to illustrate that we have to acknowledge the existing inequities, but then also take explicit actions to create equitable opportunities and outcomes in each of these core conditions. So this series of weekly core coffee chats that we've been doing is just one way to build shared knowledge and take that kind of collective action among funders, policymakers, educators, service providers, and community members who care about well-being. And we're doing all of this under the umbrella of what we call the Core Institute for Innovation and Impact. It's part of the Core Investments Initiative. And it's just a way to bring together both new and existing training and capacity building opportunities that align with and support the Core Investments mission and vision. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Lezin, who will introduce our co-sponsor.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here, and a special shout out to our guests from outside of Santa Cruz County. This is a first for the coffee chat to cross our county border, so we're pleased to have everyone here. And I also want to thank David Brody and First Five of Santa Cruz County for co-sponsoring this chat and for connecting us to the grade level reading campaign and suggesting this as a topic for the Core Coffee Chat. David is an active Core Steering Committee member and has always been a supporter of this work. And we really appreciate your participation and always thinking ahead about ways that Core can be more active in our community and more known through things like this chat and the Core Institute. So thank you, David. I'll turn it over to you to introduce Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see all of you virtually. Thank you again for joining us for this very important discussion with Superintendent Rodriguez and so many of our community partners. Again, my name is David Brody. I'm the Executive Director of First Five Santa Cruz County. For those of you that may not know, First Five is a public commission, one of 58 commissions just like it in every county in the state of California. We were established back in 1998 to promote the well-being of young children prenatal through age 5 and their families. Our mission is to ensure that early childhood systems and supports foster equitable health development and well-being for all young children in Santa Cruz County. One way we execute that mission is by partnering with like-minded initiatives and organizations at the national, state, and local level who are equally committed to doing right by children and families. In that vein, we have served as the lead agency in Santa Cruz County for a number of years for the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading. The campaign is a collaborative of foundations, nonprofit partners, business leaders, states, jurisdictions, public school systems, and communities focused on ensuring that low-income children succeed in school, graduate prepared for college, career, and of course, active citizenship. To accomplish that, as Nicole referenced, the campaign focuses on a critical predictor of school success and high school graduation, grade level reading by the end of 3rd grade. We are here virtually today, not only as part of our local Core Coffee Chat, like Nicole's mentioned, but as part of the National Grade Level Reading Week 2020, a schedule of events organized by the campaign across the entire country this week, focused on grade level reading, learning loss recovery, and what we can do collectively to support our kids, especially in this unique time of COVID. I want to thank Yoli Flores, who is joining us on the call. She is the Chief Program Officer for the campaign, a Southern California native lifelong advocate for children and was really actually integral in reaching out to me and making us part of this week and helping get this whole project and program together today. I also have to shout out to Jenny Atkinson. I saw joined us from the campaign, a former colleague of mine at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston. So now, without any further ado, I wanted to introduce our featured presenter, Pájaro Valley Unified School District Superintendent, Dr. Michelle Rodriguez. As many of you know, Dr. Rodriguez is an inspired leader, an agent for change in Santa Cruz County and the Pájaro Valley. And near and dear to our hearts at First Five is also an expert in early childhood development and early literacy. Dr. Rodriguez has implemented a number of new and innovative programs at PVUSD, not the least of which is her early literacy initiative, Paso a Paso. And in her relatively short tenure so far at the district, has shown, in my view, outstanding leadership, outstanding courage in standing up for the children and families of her district while holding herself and her team accountable for their success. It brings me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Rodriguez.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I so appreciate that. And I believe I'm gonna be able to share my screen. So I will go ahead and do that. Again, thank you for allowing me to showcase the work that we've been doing in Pájaro Valley Unified School District. So just before I get started, I want to thank all the teachers who are online. Many of you, I'm going to be talking about your work that we've been doing together. Also, I know she's not listening because she is retired now, but I want to give a special thanks to Linda Pate, who was our early literacy coordinator for 3 of the years, and then Nicole Marsh, who is going to continue on with the work as we move forward. And so we have a saying, reading by 3rd grade, where all really means all. I know most people know who we are, but I know that there's some out of state people. So I wanted to just showcase who we are. When we talk about educational equity, what's really important, that's extremely important for us because of the fact of who we serve. So I frequently always say that the reason why I came to PVUSD and my entire almost 30 years in education has been dedicated to vulnerable student populations, because I believe we should be an advocate for those who don't have an advocate for themselves. And so this is who we serve. So almost 20,000 students. It includes, if you go off to the far, we have almost 2,500 employees and that work with our students. And you'll see a large number are student English learners and also students of poverty as we move forward. So we talk about our expanded definition of student success. I'll say when I first got here, I did a strong focus on this first element, which is the strong academic and literacy foundation. But what we know to be true, and I think our teachers have expressed it intently, is that we really have to support the development of the whole child. So what you'll see is as we're moving through our initiatives, we've really continued to pivot and move forward with not only looking at the academic and the literacy foundation, but also just the development of the whole child so that they're successful in college and career and life, right? We want them to see that. So many times people ask me, well, what is your definition of educational equity? What do you believe that that means to be? So for me, it's really about social justice, right? Ensuring that we are ensuring that the system's time, attention, and resources are there to empower and provide advocacy for our students, parents, and communities. Because we all feel and we know that our students will rise to the occasion as long as we provide them high expectations coupled with high supports. And that they have unlimited potential. We often talk about them pursuing futures beyond even what they currently can imagine. And we know that when we touch a child, we touch the family, which then in turn touches the community. And so we know we can't do this alone. So it was, I do really appreciate First Five and the work that they have been helping us do. We have an early literacy collaborative that meets, now it's meeting about every 6 weeks, but it was meeting every 3 to 4 weeks, where we knew that we needed to, one, reach children earlier than just preschool, and even earlier than TK and kindergarten, for one. And then two, we knew if we were talking about our most vulnerable students, that we really needed to access our community partners, because the question became of how can we access parents who were not generally accessing before. So you'll see this great group that has been part of the Early Literacy Collaborative. It was developed and put together several years ago when we started Paso a Paso, or Step by Step, which I'll speak to in just a few minutes. But you'll see that First Five was one of our first partners and has been such a great support on that, as well as not only our Teachers Federation, Pájaro Valley Federation of Teachers, but other groups that you might not think, which the graphic that Nicole shared really builds off of this belief. But we too have Salud para la Gente that meets with us monthly with this, or ASR, which really helps us always look. So Susan Berchi is good at always bringing us back to, are we looking at data and making that collective impact? And then building it towards how literacy and the collaborative support social emotional learning with Pájaro Valley Prevention Students and Supports, which is PVUSD for us. And we have our other partners that are moving forward, all in an effort of ensuring that our preschools, who are doing incredible work, are also working with the public libraries and Encompass in order to access as many students as possible. And so we have, and many of you know this, so about 3 years ago now, we received a $5 million grant, which allowed us to provide Paso a Paso, or Step by Step. The actual program is called Footsteps to Brilliance, that allows students to really extend their literacy time. So I talk about 24/7 literacy, but it allows us to not only increase the number of words read in English and Spanish, but it also helps us to increase the number of minutes in which they are learning. So you think about the life of a higher socioeconomic child, many times they have literacy all around them, swirling constantly. But when you think about a student who is in a more vulnerable population, that isn't always the case. And so you'll see that we've been continuing to work on it. As of January 2019, we had read 50 million words already. When it came just this past year, we were already to 77.6 million. We are now well over 100,000 words, and we're continuing to move that forward. We know that when students just do 15 minutes 3 times a week, that they will in fact increase their literacy scores. We have continued reading challenges, so we have one that's going on right now. So we have students during the summertime who have already read over 100,000 words. And so that is what is incredible when you get partners together to help really move the work forward. And so I had mentioned our pre-K kindergarten work that is happening. So we have really strong, through Kathy Lathrop, we have a really strong preschool program. And then Angelica Renteria has a really strong migrant seasonal Head Start program. And so together we've really been working on what do those programs really need to do in order to scaffold and support and ensure that we're ready for the SIPS implementation that I'm going to be talking about in just a few minutes. And so they have always had a focus, of course, on ABC foundations. They renewed that focus, or renewed that that intent about a year and a half ago, when we found that some of our kindergarten students were not able to take on SIPs because they didn't have enough letter recognition at that time. So here you'll see our teachers are in action. So these are some pictures of either our teachers providing that support, learning that new work, or reinforcing that work. And so we're proud of the work that we're doing all the way from when you're 1 year old, if you're with using Footsteps to Brilliance, up to 3 and 4 year olds that are in our pre-K program, and then transitioning to our kinder. So this we released now over a year ago, but I wanted to go back to it because I think the key focus for us in PVUSD is that relentless ongoing focus. So you cannot have an initiative, especially something that's like early foundational literacy skills, that only is a year long or even 1 or 2 years. So we already completed now this year, our 3rd year, and we did a pilot to scale process. I know this is extremely, there's a lot of info here, so I'm just gonna go over what the key components are so that you know. If you have any questions, you can go onto our district website, and there is all this information as well as videos that explain these. But you'll see the categories up here, and if you see my marker, you'll see it. But we really believed on building district and site level capacity and taking it pilot to scale. So we started with just 3 schools, and we are now in every school, but that allowed us to really learn along the way and move, because what we found is the change in mindset and pedagogy is paramount, right? So going back again to what we believe about early literacy, what we believe is best, and what's grounded in research and brain research. So I tease sometimes, because I'm a former reading recovery teacher, I tease sometimes that I too have to go to reading recovery anonymous classes because some of the things that I used to teach and I believed with my entire heart and mind was that, and that I was doing the right thing, is I used to teach the multiple cueing systems to students. And what we actually know is that is leveraging a deficit structure. And so we've really had to go back to what does current brain research mean, right? And of course, I'm dating myself, but I was doing reading recovery now about 14, 15 years ago. So a lot has happened in terms of brain research and what we know about what is actually happening through the pathways. We also wanted, we believed in multi-level job embedded coaching. So everyone has gone to a professional development of some kind, regardless of your job. And then when you go there, it sounds good, you understand it. And then the moment that you try to implement it, you're thinking, what am I supposed to be doing in this very moment? So we've really provided, we decided that the best way to do that is job embedded coaching. So with students present, with teachers present, alongside the work. So as the moment that the teachers are providing that instruction and support, we in turn are providing that support. And so that is where I give kudos to, again, to Linda Pate and Emily, one of our coaches, and Leon, who is our consultant that comes in and provides support. I'm really looking at providing that coaching, which has morphed over time, and then monitoring that cycle for improvement. So that was 2 years ago. This year, we released this. So we have been presenting at the Carnegie Foundation on this work. I think what we wanted to do this year when we talked about it was just really showing how everything that we're doing is actually linked to this overarching belief that we need to continue to improve literacy outcomes through instruction that is based on science of reading. And we are choosing, for our explicit differentiated instruction, we are choosing to use SIPs. for many reasons, mostly because it is mastery based. So when I think about whether it was when I was a first grade dual immersion teacher or first grade bilingual teacher, a lot of times I was trying to, whether back then I was in San Diego, and so we did a lot of shared reading, a lot of guided reading, but many times I wasn't truly doing it to level of mastery of each and every individual child, which I think is where we need to get, right? Where we need to know where children are and then provide that double dose through our intervention teachers and through our classroom teachers. So this kind of right here on the left-hand side kind of goes with our whole child approach. So we do believe that if we focus on the whole child and we focus on their social emotional learning, that we do PBIS, mental health services, that we know where they are through the universal screening, that affects this entire explicit. We also know that SIPS is not working in isolation. So again, talking about the preschool programs, we have a digital program called Lexia, which can be used as a support. We have our core curriculum, which is now Benchmark Advanced or Adelante for the Spanish component. And then of course, as was mentioned before, Footsteps to Brilliance and our Parent Connections, and even Accelerated Reader, which supports volume of reading. So these elements right here, and again, there's a video if you're like, wow, she's going super fast through this. There's a video that explains all of these elements here. We, on the chart, there are 4 that we kind of laid out that we feel is really important to the work that happened this past year. So we began providing, we always were providing job embedded coaching, but what we know is that it really also, just like we're talking about personalized learning for students, we have to provide personalized learning for our teachers as well, because everyone is growing and moving at somewhat of a different pace according to their own individual needs. So we've had this past year, I think what was really beautiful, and there is 1 or 2 that I saw when I was looking at who is here a while back that are actually part of that. They are providing this multi-directional peer-to-peer support. So we have some teachers who have really taken on SIP so well, and they have now taken on a leadership and support role with their fellow colleagues as we continue to move forward, because as we're at the 17 sites, we don't have enough district support or coaches in order to be able to really be providing that support. And as we all know, we learn best from peers, right? So this year, we've, for the first time, I know Vicki Holliff is online, and her staff was one of the staffs that really took on the ownership of connecting with each other and doing what is best for students and looking at that early literacy work. And so they were stellar on the multi-directional peer-to-peer support. And really building towards understanding that this is a long-term investment, right? We are not going to give it up. We are going to continue to look at and support. We did begin to not only include special education educators, but also classified staff this past year. So we started training classified staff, so our instructional assistants, and of course our intervention teachers were there from the beginning, all in really looking at continuing to expand that growth mindset and do some vertical alignment. And so you'll see we went from 3 sites to 9 sites, and we're now at all 17 sites, including our dependent charters. And so the question came up of, okay, so you were doing that during the regular school year before COVID-19 hit. Now what was happening? And so we saw two things that occurred. One was we did have a cadre of teachers who really believed in the SIPS implementation work and continued to do some of that distance learning they kept doing small group instruction. We found that we still could, even through distance learning, we could provide SIPS instruction. It made us have to lower the number of students some because of the corrective feedback component and really understand being able to provide that. So many reduced down to 3 to 4 students. And we used to say anything single digit is what we recommended. So it could be 9 or less. So we did have to do that. We also did have many teachers expanding their work using Lexia. And so what we were able to do, and I am so excited to show you in a few minutes, I'm going to be able to actually show you some kids in the work. But as I promised Julie I would do, you're going to actually hear children. But so what happened during March through June is we continued, many teachers, not all, many teachers continued to provide the mastery test assessment, allow students to receive that instruction and then have opportunities to practice. We continued with small group live instruction, and those teachers that continued to do it kept meeting with students multiple times a week. So this is an example of what occurred. So students kept showing growth on mastery tests. Now for us, that's really important because we don't want to continue to pass students on if they're not showing mastery. And what you'll see and what's highlighted is you'll see that students continued to provide, we continue to provide mastery level assessments, and students continue to master them. We also, as I mentioned, we did expand our use of Lexia. So we know that Lexia is computer adaptive, so it helps to provide that support. We do think that the combination of SIPS and Lexia is a good combination. I wouldn't want us to just go to Lexia and just SIPS isn't enough practice for them. And we've talked, everyone that's been working on SIPS knows that, especially around year 2, we had a focus on us continuing to provide fluency experiences for kids so that they could continue to practice. If you look at this down below here, you'll see that students continued to use Lexia, and actually it increased over time when we went to distance learning. This is something that we changed when I came here. So when I first got here, Lexia was only for students in the after school program. And so we purchased it district-wide for our elementary schools. And really for very little additional dollars, for I believe it was like $30,000 more, we were able to have every child in the school district, elementary school child, have access to Lexia. And I think it's been supportive. I know this isn't about secondary, but I did want to just recognize really quick, and then I'll move on, that it is important for us to continue to provide supports throughout the secondary level as well. So what we've been accomplishing and we've been able to do is have students at the younger grades at higher and higher rates have significant growth in the area of literacy. Unfortunately, that has to move through the system. So we do have a significant amount of students at the secondary level who still do not have the literacy ability. We did start SIPS using SIPS Plus, which is the version meant for older students. We started that at the in special education last year. And we did see significant growth with those students. And then this right here is Newzilla. So again, talking about how are we monitoring progress during distance learning? How are we looking at it? So we see more and more students that teachers are providing support through Newzilla and moving it forward. And then so just going now to, so what are we still doing, knowing that we are currently doing distance learning. And so I want to talk briefly about about this project that is going on. So this project has been spearheaded by my assistant superintendent of elementary, Casey Klappenbach. So I so appreciate his work on ensuring that we are addressing unfinished learning. So for me, I think when we were talking about distance learning, one, I want PVUSD to continue to be proud of the work that we did, because many school districts provided sometimes just a plain packet that was a grade level packet, and that's what students received. Many just provided enrichment or review. We were determined to not do that. So our teachers stepped up within a week. We already were in distance learning, provided 15,000 Chromebooks to students. We have over 1,250 hotspots already out to our students, and 3,000 more that are waiting for next school year. And so we really tried to battle against having as much unfinished learning as we could, but we recognize that there is unfinished learning. So Casey really took this project on. So I appreciate the teachers that did this work. We did have over 600 students that are going into first through third, so they would have been K2 students. Then they are representing all 18 schools. So again, ensuring that we're supporting our dependent charters as well. And of those 600, 314 RSVP'd and started the work. So we have teachers currently who are providing SIPS instruction and have been practicing their skills on using Seesaw, and I'll show you a version in a minute of a student actually doing that work and how they do that practice and then show their teachers what they're doing. They also are on Lexia 4 times a week. And there's an additional, we ensured that all students 2nd through 12th grade had a Chromebook this first jaunt. We did have many 1st grade and kindergarten students that received Chromebooks, but we had some that did not. So in order to provide this support, we did provide an additional 28 Chromebooks and 14 hotspots to students to ensure that they had access to technology. We also knew that what materials do we need as we are providing this instruction, right? So we did pass out, and thank you to the team that helped pass this out. The students came right here in front of the district office at the roundabout, and they got their reading materials and their whiteboards. So you'll see Jazzy right here. You'll see her. She's off to the right here, the picture. So you'll see that she has her whiteboard with her materials. And she is online with other students and her teacher, continuing to receive SIPS instruction and support that. And then what you will see is what you'll see in terms of this work is the students then, they are able through Seesaw, they're able to provide their teachers with their work. So the teachers are able to hear and provide feedback to their students. So this is one of our incoming 2nd graders, and it is a minute long. We probably won't listen a whole minute, but I do want you to be able to hear him and what his teacher is hearing him. So here he goes.
One day, a black and white dog was carried home a bone. It was a fine bone with bits of ham. After a while, dog came to a bridge. She walked onto the bridge. Then he looked over the edge. And what did he see? A dog. He said to himself, "There's a black and white dog just like me. He's big."
So I just had to show that because one, it brought a great smile to my face when I heard his precious voice, and I always like to ground us in why we're doing what we're doing, and so it really is that's who we're doing it for, right? And so I think that's one thing I miss the most about distance learning in this whole area is not being able to hear and see the students as frequently. But so when we go back, right? So as everyone knows, things continue to change as we move forward. And one thing that the Board of Trustees has really always supported and I've appreciated is allowing me to, again, put the time, attention, and resources into early literacy, right? So they have believed that a multi-year commitment is important, and they have provided us the funding in order to be able to do it. So many of you probably know that yesterday the state Department of Education and then also the health department gave approval for everyone to go to full distance learning at the TK third grade level as well, full district. We are going to be moving in that direction as well. I think almost no one would have anticipated really when California came back that we would wind up regressing back on our reopening of the state of California. And so the key for me is with the contingency plans, and if you've been linked to that, is that we have plans for every type of situation throughout the whole year. But one thing that is a continued focus, it really doesn't matter if we are doing distance learning or we are doing or we're doing it in person, is we believe that these three things are important. And so what I would say in terms of what we're doing this upcoming school year is continue to focus on the three core actions, because we know when we focus a lot on the opportunity myth work. What we know is the best way in order to be able to provide supports to students is to provide them high quality instruction. And I believe that our team is up to that task. So when we look at what is, whether it is in a remote setting where we have students that, as you just saw Jazzy doing, where she is coming and seeing it through a virtual setting, or when we can get our students back in person, we are looking at complexity. So our students focus on high quality text during the lesson. And you know, the reason why we continued moving forward with Benchmark Advance or Benchmark Adelante is our teachers were having to really scavenger out and find those materials without having a core text. Because we had an adoption as many within the state of California that was almost 10 years old. And so we really wanted to look at and ensure that students are being provided high quality text during the lessons. We also want to make sure that students are really citing evidence and do the questions and tasks. So not just the questions, but we're asking them to do corresponding to the work. Do we integrate standards and really build comprehension of text and its meaning? So I often, and I think when I was a first grade teacher, I had to remember this as well. I'm not really teaching them to read that text. I'm giving them the skill set in order to be able to read any text. And that text that I'm currently working on is a vehicle, right, to get them to independence. And I think I used to not always know that when I first started. And so I this kind of builds off of that belief that we need to make sure that we are really doing questions and tasks that integrate those standards, because sometimes we have kids do high quality text and then the activity or the task we have them linked to is not the same. And then our third, are students responsible for doing the thinking in this room? So I'll say that between my first year of teaching and my 10th year of teaching, I grew a lot in this area because, and then now just as education and brain research continues, really who's doing the thinking in the room, right? I remember days where when I got done with teaching, I was definitely more tired than the students. And so I would say that I was probably doing more of the work for them than they were being required to do themselves. And so regardless of what we are doing, whether it's distance learning, which is where we're planning on heading now, to when we have the ability to bring students back in, we will be dealing with and supporting unfinished learning by ensuring that we're providing high quality instruction, using our intervention teachers well, as they have been. So the intervention teachers and classroom teachers have really stepped up the last several years to ensure that we're providing double dose or extended SIPS work, and also working with the other areas. And I will be able to go ahead and stop now. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. We have a couple questions coming in the chat. Encourage everyone to share those. Let's start with Sarah Brothers from the Arts Council, who'd asked about how you envision arts education and arts integration supporting the work of early literacy collaboratives and developing literacy skills. Could you?
Yeah, so, and I know Sue Galti is on the line. So she has been my mastermind on really ensuring that we are re-infusing and reinvigorating the work that we're doing around the arts. So we do believe, so that the arts for me, I think builds two ways on literacy. One, it helps support the whole child. So what we know is when students are connected and happy with going to school, that they want to attend more, they're more motivated. But we also know that it has a direct impact on literacy and on mathematical skills. So we have a program called El Sistema. Isabel helps lead that work along with Susan Galti. And what we have seen is a direct correlation between the students who are learning within the arts, in this case, the program is El Sistema, and their scores on not only literacy, but also mathematics as well. So when we think about it in terms of distance learning, what I would say is our teachers have really stepped up in ensuring that students continue to support. So we really found that our students had feelings of isolation and just disappointment, right, from being taken from their schools. And so if you follow Sue Galti, I tried to retweet all of hers. What you'll see is students continued, our arts teachers continue to do work with our students. You'll see that our band instructors continue to do work with students. So we checked out the instruments to students, and we do believe that you can continue to do arts and music instruction virtually. And they really proved that point. We had everything from having students do arts projects with materials that anyone would have in their home, to some teachers literally went and dropped off arts packages of supplies for their students. And so we had a whole gamut of people who were able to do that.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Margaret about how the district is planning to get new families in transitional kindergarten and kindergarten up to speed on technology literacy and implementing some of the home-based foundational skills during distance learning.
Sure, yeah. So I think we did have, we definitely had an advantage this year in that students had already been at school for many months, especially our youngest of students had already been at school. So they already had received some support and instruction on how to use a Chromebook, how to log in. We are going to be providing the QR codes this year. We did not do that this past year. I am already working with DLAC and thinking of different ways we can get parents on. We will be looking at how can we safely do small group supports for parents. Because they're going to need it. We still, to this day, we have the techs who are providing all the support. So the hotlines and the drive-through support is still available. We will be providing both the hotspots and the technology about a week and a half before school starts so that we can get parents up to speed. We still need to work on those elements of exact timelines. And of course, as health conditions continue to change, we will have to pivot and support. But again, it will go back to what we had said before with our early literacy collaborative. So really, how can we leverage the many partnerships that we have within the school district that really many of them are very unique to PVUSD, to Pájaro Valley. How can we leverage that to get to the most vulnerable parents, right? So we pretty easily can access those parents who are very involved, who are already asking us questions. The question isn't how as much to get their support as it is how do we provide support to parents who are harder to access, right? Who perhaps are currently working in the fields and aren't always able to go to a school site during the middle of the day. And so I think for us, leveraging our partners, going where our parents go, right? So going to Salud para la Gente, going to the libraries is a really important thing.
Okay, thanks for that. We also have a comment from Lisa about the early childhood education child development group developing weekly plans and asking for help from community partners to distribute those to anyone they have contact with. So Lisa, we'll share your information in a follow-up email that we send out with Dr. Rodriguez's slides as well. So if people want to follow up directly, have that opportunity.
Yeah, and Kathy is on, Kathy Lathrop, our director of EC is on that collaborative. So I'm sure she
Dr. R, actually, that was my comment. Lisa signed me in as I was zooming into work.
There you go. Okay, well, there you go. Well, I'm sure you'll continue to access them.
Okay, and then
showing as Lisa and me, Angelica Renteria, showing as Kathy, just so you know.
Okay, so you guys are just trying to confuse me. Good
The
job.
definition of collaboration, we exchanged names.
That's pretty good.
you fooled us. Well, we're thankful that all of you are here under any names that you choose. And again, thanks to those of you who joined from both near and far. Are there any other last questions for Dr. Rodriguez while we have her? We have just a couple minutes left here. Go ahead.
I had a question, thanks. Dr. Rodriguez, your comment about unfinished learning is quite powerful, and I know that it kind of gets in the way of the other PVUSD goal, which is reading at grade level at the right time. And I'm wondering, what's your solution?
Well, I think it's continuing to provide mastery-based literacy for our literacy instruction for our students. So now more than ever, we have to be data-driven and mastery-driven in order to be able to fill those holes as quickly as we can. What we know is that if we couple SIPS instruction with strong first instruction and then layer on Lexia on top of that for that personalized learning, that we can accelerate quickly. And so what my focus will be, especially if we, as we're moving to distance learning only, is how can we continue to replicate that work within Zooms, right? And what pivots and changes do we have to make it work? Because we are not going to want to have our students not receive high quality foundational literacy instruction, because that will only get them behind. So originally, when we were talking about it, we were talking about only bringing back TK through third grade students because of the fact that I do surely believe, I think it's also because I just lived it for so many years, that early literacy is easier, significantly easier in person, right? It just is. Being able to see their mouths and clearly and work with them, and touch their arm while they're wiggling away, right? And all those things make it much easier. But we're at the point now where health conditions are deteriorating, and so we're just not able to do that. And so now how do we pivot once again, which I have continued to change the plan. The only thing that the plan had to do is you had to plan to change, right? And so we now are moving it forward, but we're gonna need that eventually as we move the work. So
Dr. Rodriguez, may I add just a moment in for the early childhood component of our district?
Of course.
So I just want to let this group know that all across the early childhood education programs, both the state and federal programs, we are continuing with our, I like to say, catch them before they fall. So we don't want them to even get to kinder behind. So at all levels from infant to 5 that we're serving, we are providing distance learning. We're providing packets. This year we're moving towards actually assessment-based components in our distant learning. So we'll be tracking student progress. That's true in the Migrant Head Start, the full day, and the state preschool programs. We have strong early literacy components that will be embedded in there, and digital platforms we're using. The last thing is our Raising a Reader program is continuing to look for innovative ways to serve the community at large, not just the children that are enrolled in our PVUSD programs, but the Head Start kids, the Community Bridges kids, the kids that are in family, friend, and neighbor care, family, child care, home care. So, they're all coming to our district. We want to get them as prepared as possible. And Raising Readers in the process of distributing 4,000 magazines to the community in the county. And we're just looking for, and we're doing another push towards Footsteps to get parents onto that. So looking for all the avenues we can get them to kinder as ready as they can for then zooming on to the next levels of early literacy that Dr. Rodriguez so well represented.
Thank you, Lisa. I see that we're officially out of time, so I just want to give another thank you to David for connecting all of us and for all of the work you and your colleagues at First 5 do to champion families with young children, and to Dr. Rodriguez for a presentation very thought-provoking and informing all of us about what's going on locally, and to our guests from outside Santa Cruz County. Always nice to showcase what's happening here to the rest of the state and the country. We might be able to hang out for a few minutes, Dr. Rodriguez. We have a couple stray questions past our official time, but for those of you who do have to go, we urge you to fill out our feedback survey. We are eager to learn from you about what might be possible topics for future chats. We read all of the surveys and take all of the feedback very seriously, so we urge you to fill that out. We are going to take the week of July 28th off and come back in August with some other topics and possibly a revised schedule. But on the 21st of July, next week, we have a coffee chat on health and all policies and how health and equity ripple through that planning at the City of Santa Cruz, and that's co-sponsored with the City of Santa Cruz. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. But for now, thanks to all of you, and especially to David and to Dr. Rodriguez for the chat today.
Can I just quickly say, pass on my thanks as well to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, for the representatives that joined us on the call. And I just want to express my true admiration for Dr. Rodriguez and for her entire team, for Kathy and the Child Development Group. I can't imagine what we do without you, frankly. And so it brings great pride, frankly, for me that we have you in Santa Cruz County, and First Five stands with you and ready to support in any way we can for our kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your work as well.
Dr. Rodriguez, would you have a couple moments to just address some of the stray questions here, or are you moving on to another meeting?
I'm supposed to move on. I'm actually on vacation today, but I have one other meeting after this. I can do a few quickly.
Okay, great.
They're already binging me for the next.
Oh, okay. You know what we could do is we can, we often send out a written Q&A document after our calls. So we can assemble the questions for you and try to deal with them by email. So.
Okay, I can do a few, but yeah, you know how the Zoom says they're waiting for you.
I do know that well. So just one quick question, might not be that quick, but what can teachers expect training-wise to support distance learning for TK through second grade?
Mm-hmm. So we're in the process of establishing the year-long professional development plan. And so we were already planning on doing that for grades 4 through 12 with our original plan. And so that would now just encapsulate in the TK3 teachers. I think we've learned a lot between not only what the teachers that were successful that did it during the March through June, but also this last cadre of teachers. So we had 18 teachers that have been working with students. And so we learned a lot about that. So that will occur during the first 2 days coming back. And then, as all good professional development should be, then it will continue on throughout the year. So the teachers that did continue to provide SIPS instruction, they actually continued to provide support. They were continuing to receive support from Ann Leon, and at that time Linda, and so it'll be Nicole and Emily, and they will continue to do that, because no matter what, it's not going to be a 1 or 2 day and then you're on your own, but it's a continual process of looking at what we need to do in order to support, and then being able to provide those supports. But the good part is we have a cadre of teachers who have already learned a lot from this experience, and we'll use that feedback so that we can do a good job for all of our students throughout the district.
Okay, great, thanks. And then one last question about whether any funding is available for libraries to buy books or ebooks in distance learning mode.
Yeah, so, well, I think a couple of things. One, I don't really think we need more ebooks. So we have several systems that are virtual, and so I really want us to continue to utilize those resources well. So whether it is Footsteps to Brilliance, Accelerated Reader, which I understand we need to get the books to those, but Accelerated Reader, Newzilla, or News ELA, however people wish to speak to it, or when we're looking at SIPS itself, I wanna, and then Benchmark. So the key and the reason why we're moving forward with Benchmark for the second set of schools, so the first set did Benchmark, is that we know that Benchmark was built to be a digital program. And so going back to my original conversation about the core action, number 1, which is high quality grade level material, right? So we really need to look at, are we fully utilizing XYZ, right? Are we utilizing what we have and using it well prior to purchasing a lot of materials? You know, I believe in 24/7 digital learning. So after we make that evaluation, then if we find that we need to purchase additional, then we would, but we would need to decide that that is the investment that we feel would make the most leverage. Funding wise, we did receive CARES funding, which does support distance learning, but that pot is what it is, right? So if we decide to utilize funding for one thing, then we don't have funding for another. And so we just have to make sure that we're using the highest leverage materials and strategies to impact learning.
Great, thanks. I see that some people have shared other resources. We'll get those out to everyone. Migrant Ed, Let's Find Out, Science Spins. We'll share what people have been sharing in the chat.
Okay.
But we also have a comment in the chat that the vacation is not going very well with back-to-back Zoom calls at the outset. So we want to let you go. Back to your.
I have 3 others during my actual vacation, but it's okay.
Okay.
At least I'll be able to see my child, who I haven't been able to see for 6 weeks. So he's 20.
Okay. Well, enjoy and thank you. And thanks to everyone who stayed a little later to hear the tail end of these questions. We'll get all this information back out to everyone, but want to thank you for joining, and everyone take care of yourselves.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.